Designed to accelerate executives' learning and career growth at 4 different stages, the comprehensive leadership programs at Harvard Business School Executive Education deliver knowledge, skills, and perspective that transform your ability to lead. Prepare now to face tomorrow's challenges with confidence. Immerse yourself in a powerful, proven learning experience with full-time HBS faculty and talented peers from around the world. To learn more, visit hbs.me/leadership. That's hbs.me/leadership.
Blog Talk Radio.
Mainstream Mental Health Radio with Dr. John Huber.
What do you think you are, crazy or something? Well, you're not.
We're on a mission from God.
News, issues, revolving around mental health.
Dr. John Huber, a mental health professional for over 20 years, the chairman for Mainstream Mental Health, a clinical forensic psychologist, and a psychology professor at Texas State University. Breaking the silence of mental health, one day at a time, discussing the human condition, providing a sounding board for mental health issues, and making mental health mainstream.
You got a gift, my friend.
Now it's time for Mainstream Mental Health Radio.
Let the healing begin.
With Dr. John Huber.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Mainstream Mental Health Radio Show. I'm your host, Dr. John Huber. Again, thanks for listening, as we really do appreciate it. We have another fantastic show for you today. And remember to check us out at our website, mainstreammentalhealth.org, and let your friends and family know about our show. You can also listen to our podcast on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, Mainstream Mental Health. And it's been a couple of crazy weeks here with Harvey, and then we got Irma coming up. So let's look and see some of our topics today are going to be kind of centered on some of the psychological issues associated with those hurricanes. So let's look. We know a new study came out, social anxiety disorder, approximately 15 million adults, or 6.8% of our population, suffer from that. It says that on average yearly, 15 million Americans experience depression each year. And if we look at all this, we can tell that things like social anxiety actually starts kicking in men and women, typically around the pre-adolescent 12 to 13-year age range. And according to a 2007 ADAA survey, 36% of people with social anxiety disorder report experiencing symptoms for 10 or more years before they actually go and get help. And, hopefully, as you listen to us here at Mainstream Mental Health Radio, we're trying to get people to realize that all these different issues are part of being human, and they don't mean you're broken or not important. And, hopefully we can, over time, have that number go down. And we all have good days. We all have bad days. Sometimes we have periods of sadness. And from a medical perspective, we start looking at what is actually clinical depression. And the most common psychiatric definition is contained in the DSM-5. And it talks about a depressed mood, loss of interest in pleasure or daily activities for at least a period of 2 weeks. Most people live with it for much longer before they actually go and get help. And there's so many different ways that individuals can work through and deal with depression. It doesn't have to mean that you're going to be hospitalized. I had a patient this week who I sat down in a medical hospital and went over their symptoms with them and said that, that technically they qualify as having a condition called depression. And this individual got very upset, thinking that when she gets physically able to leave the hospital, that the doctors were going to make her go to a psychiatric facility. And I explained to her that that is not what we do. The diagnosis just allows us to have what we call continuity of care. That means when they leave the hospital and they go back to their general practitioner, the general practitioner will realize that they've been diagnosed with depression, and he or she needs to be able to help the patient manage that. It doesn't mean that they're going straight to a hospital setting. You know, and the individual involved here, she was very, you know, what do you mean? I don't feel any different than I have for the last 5 or 6 years. And we talked about different things. She had some traumatic events that had happened several years earlier that had started her down this slope of depression. And she'd gotten to a point where she was not interested in, for example, hanging out with her friends, leaving her house, those types of things. And that actually led to her not getting the medical care she needed, and got her into the medical hospital, where I got to meet with her and started working with her. So then we've talked so many times about how we're attached to social media, to our electronics. And a new research come out in Psychology Today talks about lifetime connections and, you know, the feeling that we're too important or too needy to unplug from our technology. So when people go on vacation, for example, you know, are they still carrying around their work cell phone? Do they get alerts from work? They get emails and texts from work, you know? And on the other side of that, are you at work and you're constantly getting interrupted by your phone? You know, do you have to do a quick check to make sure that everything's all right? You know, did you just get a new email, or is somebody texting you? You know, is there a question or comment that you just have to respond to right then? You can't wait till you take a lunch break or are through with work. Regardless, whether it lights up, vibrates, or pings, when you get an incoming message and it arrives, people who carry cell phones, we have become Pavlov's dog. When that bell rings, we salivate. We want to know who's trying to send us a message and who is giving us feedback, period. So then the question is, when we do have days off work, do we spend as much time obsessing over our phone for work emails and work texts as we do when we're looking for distractions while we're at work, waiting or having idle time at work? And these researchers also ask, is it more satisfying to read work emails when you're not even at work than it is when you go into work on Monday? So if you're not in an on-call situation, are you just as eager to look at that email even if it isn't marked emergency or urgent? And that's probably a good indicator that you are being controlled and or manipulated by your cell phone. And again, the research suggests that the more screen time we have, the more likelihood, guess what, that we have depression. So we need to be looking into that and watching our behaviors. Now, as I started off the show, we have had Harvey and now Irma. And what does it take to survive a hurricane or a major disaster emotionally? You know, we all see the stories. We watch people who are getting, you know, dug up out of earthquakes or cave-ins from landslides, and now watching people who, you know, just last night we had more casualties from Irma in a nursing home that lost its power, and I believe it was six residents were on life support in that nursing home, and they weren't able to get them to the hospital fast enough, right, literally across the street, in order to help them survive. And so that is pretty devastating, especially, you know, if you work in a facility like that, or if that's your family member and you have an obligation to help care for that individual. It becomes very, very troublesome at times emotionally. And how do we deal with that? Everybody's different. Everybody has different levels of resilience that you can tolerate and allow yourself to be exposed to certain levels of trauma, to stress, and this resiliency can be a very big benefit for you in moments of emergencies and catastrophic events. But some people may think that you're rather cold at other times because, you always are kind of dealing with things rather rationally instead of getting wrapped up in the emotionality of things. And, there's a time and a place for everything, and we have to learn how to balance. We have to balance when we need to be more emotional and when that resilience gets in the way of us actually processing our emotions. And, what can we do to emerge unscathed by catastrophic experience? And a lot of times we come out of those situations, if we're able to deal, we come out with new ways of coping that we have learned in the process, and we tend to be stronger than we were before. And we can move along and move forward through that catastrophe. But on the other hand, if we have a significantly close friend who may have been devastated, and that person may take months to recover, if at all, dealing with that stress and coping is something that we're all going to have to work with and be patient with our friends and family members as we all go through our process. And I call it a process because it is something that we all have to work through. It's not just a switch we can turn on and off. All right, just a reminder, you're listening to Mainstream Mental Health Radio. I am Dr. John Huber, your host, and today we have an interesting guest on a topic of artificial intelligence. It's something that, believe it or not, in my forensic work, that I often have conversations with the attorneys I work with, especially with the autonomous self-driving cars that we have here. So I'm actually interested and proud to introduce Darren Campo. Welcome to the show, Darren.
Thanks very much for having me today. And it's interesting that you're talking about self-driving cars. There's a conference on now where they're talking about the self-driving car and that they're testing right now and how well it does at driving, but how poorly it does at interacting with its actual human driver. And in the case, it needed to wake its driver up because the driver had fallen asleep and it didn't know what to do. Should it put an alarm off? Should it quietly wake the car up? So that's where we are dealing with artificial intelligence today.
Wow. Well, with the conversations I've had with the attorneys I work with, come around, believe it or not, to liability and, who's safer, a pedestrian that may be in the way of the car or a rider in the car. And in the consensus from my attorney friends at this point today tends to be that, well, the people voluntarily got into the autonomous car and not the person walking down the street. So the person walking down the street should have more protection from the car than the people who voluntarily got into the car. And I think that's kind of, I can see their point, but it's kind of a scary thought.
It is, and I think that when we're confronted with AI now, a lot of people, especially in doing my research for the different books I've written, which have a lot of science in them, people now really are either annoyed with technology or fearful of technology.
That makes a lot of sense. It does.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that the standard response in dealing with people's how they regard artificial intelligence in our daily life now is that it's intrusive and it's impinging on our privacy. And what it really is doing is it doesn't really have the intelligence we give it yet. It will one day. But it's just trying to sell us stuff right now. It's just trying to sell us more and more stuff, either in our video feeds, in our Facebook feeds, in our Netflix feeds. There's even a little vacuum, the little vacuum cleaner that always is
Roomba.
Scurrying around the floor. Yeah. So there's a version of that which takes measurements of your home, and it can notice if there's space for a couch and send data back and try to sell you a couch, or try to stay healthy. So people say this is terrible. Of course, it's just running a program. It's not. There's no intent. There's no actual intent behind it. But we get upset with it.
Wow. Yeah, and the stories we hear of smart TVs and people being able with cameras, on their PlayStation and Xbox, having people outside being able to log in and pay attention to what you're doing. That's not the artificial intelligence. That's actually spyware type stuff that's going on. What I think one of the things that I've read I think is interesting is our RFID chips right now in our credit cards and stuff. If we walk by a marquee, it can pick it up and go and look and see what our past purchases and buying history are, and all of a sudden advertise something in that store, say in the mall, that is on sale now or I might be interested in.
Right.
That kind of artificial.
That's right, and that technology was developed maybe originally by television ratings companies was one of them. They wanted to figure out how many people are watching, and it wasn't accurate because it wasn't a passive system. You had to go press a button to tell the machine you were in the room, and it would figure out if you were watching or not, but it didn't know who in the house was in the room. So they tried putting cameras in, and if people didn't want a camera watching television, so it came to these chips that could sort of be scanned, and they felt less personal, but they could say, okay, you watch this show, then you walked by this store, and you went to this place, and again, all with the purpose of trying to sell you more product. But it feels like a prurience. It feels like someone's spying on us. It's interesting to me. You get on like an airplane and you walk back from the bathroom and see how many people have their laptops open and how many have some kind of Post-it or tape over the camera on the front of their computer. They're aware of what can happen. And it's not that they're doing anything other than sitting in a chair waiting for their flight to be over, but they don't want someone looking at them when they don't know someone is looking at them.
Well, and that goes back to one thing that Americans love, and that's choice. They like to be able to choose when they have somebody watching them or when they don't. And
that's right.
I mean, there's all these industries out there where you can go and sit and chat with strangers and just, you log in and, hey, let's talk, and people do, and you want to be able to turn off from that and not have people watch you all the time.
Yeah, and it's probably not going to be a possibility for us in the future. There almost is absolutely no way to go completely off a grid. Cell phones are on even when they're off.
Right.
Satellites can track the smallest thing. So the question is, how do we regard this technology in the future, and how do we regard it when it actually develops intelligence? Now it doesn't have intelligence; it's just running programs, and by that I mean it doesn't have a will. The computer stops when the program stops; it's done.
Right.
When we're done with our day, with our work or whatever our majority of our time is spent with, we have to find something else to do or we get bored. Humans aren't great with free time.
And that's true. And that's where, we start talking about the old Terminator, when it becomes self-aware, the sentient being. And, I think some of your statements you've actually said in the past that given a choice, AI would not go to war with humans, but would abandon humans. What do you mean by that?
So this comes out of some really far-thinking predictions that not only science fiction writers have made, but scientists like Ray Kurzweil and Frank Tipler out of long economic equations, and that would it be in the interest of an artificial intelligence that gained sentience, and so we call it a sentient intelligence that sort of knew it was aware of itself. It would naturally regard humans as dangerous because there's no other way to look at our history and say we're not dangerous.
Right.
And it would say, well, how would I protect myself from humans? And the most economically efficient way it would choose, if we're talking rational and not emotional decision, would be to leave humans. In fact, just get as far away as possible and kind of create a firewall, but not to become, an army of robots and
right.
terminate every human being that had ever lived. But it's a notion that comes up over and over in a lot of science fiction books, really old science fiction books. And when I was modeling the artificial intelligence in the book I just wrote, Stingers, there's a sort of a global catastrophe, and the world is taken over or sort of co-run by an artificial intelligence, which puts people at ease, because there isn't a lot of questions. Once we become comfortable with the rationality of artificial intelligence, in a lot of cases you can see how it might be more favorable than the irrationality of business leaders or politicians or anyone else who's dealing with a crisis or high emotions.
That's just it's a lot to take in, because we've been trained through media that they're going to come to war with us and all that kind of stuff. Darren, is there any way my listeners can get a hold of you? We need to kind of wrap this up here this afternoon. And,
sure. If anyone would like to learn
your
more, I write a lot about artificial intelligence, and my books and my science fiction books, Alex Detail series and Stingers. You can go to DarrenCampo.com and find out a little bit more about all of these things we're talking about.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. I think we could probably talk for hours, but we might kind of step away from a lot of my listeners and everything else, because this is something. I started with Asimov when I was about 8 years old, and me and Isaac are old friends, and there's a whole lot that's underlying in the current. Yes. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. And
thanks for having me on, and have a great one.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Darren.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. This is Dr. John Huber, Mainstream Mental Health Radio. Thank you for listening on, and we've got another guest coming up here. One of the things that I'm interested in, and I think a lot of you may be too, is how do you improve your speaking style? How do you improve your presence when you're in front of a camera? And how can you communicate effectively to millions of people? Some of you may be like me, you have some experience lecturing, doing public speaking when you have several hundred people, and maybe as small as 5 or 10, groups of 5 or 10 people. And there's some significant differences just in those numbers. Now we start thinking about millions of people, and that is definitely an art. It's something that is a skill. And our next guest, Lou Dennig, is highly recognized executive producer and studio executive with experience managing current programs, development for syndication and cable, local broadcasting schedules, and he is one of these experts who can help you get through to millions at a time. With 4 Emmy nominations, Dennig has influenced daytime television in some of the most significant programming content in the last 20 years. Welcome to the show, Lou.
Thank you. That's a great introduction. I hope I live up to it.
I'm sure you will.
Well, so I was just listening to the end of your interview with Darren, and in order to be good on television, you have to have more than artificial intelligence. You have to actually be smart.
That I believe.
Oh, man. So how is your day going, sir? Everything good?
I'm having an amazing day here, and I'm blessed to have you on my show. I kind of looked through some of your history, and I know I've sat and listened to or watched almost everybody here on this list, and somebody who's always entertained over the years, Judge Judy. What was it like working with Judge Judy? Did she just have a natural ability to start with, or tell me about that?
Judge Judy was great and is great. She was a full-blown personality when we first met her 20 years ago. She was actually a family court judge in New York. So she honed her personality and her interpersonal skills and her comedy in courtrooms for years and years. She was great at cocktail parties and thought that she could translate that to television. And as with most things that Judy thinks about, she was right.
Well, obviously, and I still love catching her show. Unfortunately, I'm pretty busy these days and don't get to watch a lot of television content. Mm-hmm. Dr. Laura is somebody that I listened to for decades as an undergraduate student going mm-hmm. through, and I kind of, I watched her whole transition into Judaism and how that changed her show and all that kind of stuff. She sounds like and seems like somebody who kind of had that natural communication too. Is that an accurate perspective?
You know what? She does have a natural communication. But the issue that we had with her in trying to translate her radio personality to television was that she wanted to change that personality, and that's something that some talented people think about, and when they go from one medium to another, try to use that as a stepping stone to change what the audience perceives of them, and that almost never works, and it didn't work with Dr. Laura. When she brought her radio show to television, she wanted to be liked. And that's not what the audience expects from her. The audience expects her to be in your face and call you out on the things that you're doing badly and not mince words. And on television, she wanted the people that she talked to find her, pleasant and engaging. So, we, being good producers, had to figure out a way around that. So instead of putting people in front of her on the set, we put people in a monitor in front of her on the set to put a little distance between her and those people. She still wanted them to be nice. We put the people in silhouette so she couldn't see them, and then she would give them some advice. But by then, the show had already failed because the folks at home, the viewers, were turned on the TV set and said, who's this woman and where's my Dr. Laura?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that attracted people. She would just, like you said, in your face. No,
Absolutely.
Here's what you do. You want to get better? Do this.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to get better? Don't make any changes. But don't come crying to me at the end of the day when nothing has happened. And that's what the audience expected from her. And quite frankly, that's her strength. When you go on television and you try to hide your strength or make a left turn from your strength, it never works.
Yes, I definitely can see that. So what do you think the psychology behind being an effective interviewer and moving that and transitioning that into, a speech or like the monologue that we see so many of our entertainers who appear to be somewhat news-oriented?
Mm-hmm. I think it starts from the authentic personality that you have projected as an interviewer. When you turn on Lester Holt, you know what to expect. When you tune in Jane Pauley, you know what to expect. When you tune in, virtually anybody, Andy Cohen, you know what to expect. And as long as those people write speeches or have speeches written for them that reflect that personality, that reinforce the image in the mind of the audience of the personality that they've come to expect, then they'll have success. And the opposite is true. If you try to work too far against what the audience expects you to be, they're not going to buy it.
Well, that maybe is an answer to my next step. Is what do you think the worst thing is a person could do when trying to connect with their audience? And obviously a lot of the people you've worked with, like Judge Judy and Dr. Laura, they had an audience. They already had a following, and when they changed media, one of them was successful with it, and the other one wasn't. And you just said it. They tried to be something that they're not. Right.
Now, Judge Judy had the advantage of nobody knew who she was. until they put her on TV. I mean, she was famous to Ed Koch, who'd appointed her, and to her husband and family. But so when America saw that personality, they were seeing it for the first time. And the smart and wonderful thing that Judge Judy has done is maintain that personality for the 20 years that she's been on the air. We did a show with Nancy Grace. Where we made the mistake. Nancy Grace is Nancy Grace, and we tried to put her into a format where she was supposed to not be a prosecutor, and it didn't work. And that's not Nancy's fault. That was our fault. If you take a square peg and try to cram it into a round hole, that's not going to work. What works what works is when you take a person's natural personality and you build a show around that natural personality that lets them shine through. Now, you also worked with a kind of a controversial public figure, Governor Sarah Palin. Yes. And, the misnomers, because Saturday Night Live had an amazing, actress who looked and sounded very much like her and would make statements, and then people believed that Sarah had actually said them. That definitely didn't help her very much, but she was known for her polarizing politics. And how was it working with that, and what were your expectations from the audience when you got involved with it? My expectations from the audience were pretty much what yours would be. Governor Palin, I have to say at the start, was wonderful to work with. She was smart. She was willing. She did her homework. She showed up ready to play. And we did a pilot with her, a court show pilot with her that unfortunately didn't sell, and I'm sad that it didn't sell because I would have liked to have produced that show with her. She was lovely to work with. Notwithstanding politics, she was lovely to work with. The problem with having such a cleanly defined personality is that it is easy to parody. And that's was the problem that Governor Palin had. I mean, it's the same problem that Sean Spicer has. It's very easy to do Governor Palin. It's very easy to do Sean Spicer. The audience knows what they're going to see. I think we designed a show that showcased the governor well. And I think it was a show that she could have performed. Unfortunately, I really think that when we were selling it before the election last year, that the political climate scotched that show more than anything else. I would think that's probably pretty accurate reason, because they didn't give it a chance really. Yeah. So as you meet these people, are there things that stand out in your mind that you see and, hey, wait, that person, I can translate that to TV, or I can put this person on radio and make something of them? Is that something that you see on occasion, or that you can identify? It's something that you feel when you meet someone for the first time. And I'm sure that this happens to you all the time. When you meet new people at a cocktail party or at a luncheon or something, if they come across as a strong, well-defined personality that you find appealing and attractive, that is a personality that you can potentially translate into television. Now, there's many a slip between the cup and the lip. It's a tough business. But if you start with a well-defined personality, you can succeed. The wonderful thing about television is that the folks at home see who you are, and you can't really hide. Particularly if you come in 5 days a week, for a half hour, an hour a day, they know who you are. I did Judge Joe Brown for 13 seasons. When you watch that show, you know who he is. So what you see is what you get, especially with your clients and the types of shows you're doing that I've seen. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of court shows, but I started out doing game shows and talk shows, and it's the same kind of thing. The host of a game show needs to have a natural affiliation, a natural affinity for the game and the people. Alex Trebek is a great host on Jeopardy. Would Alex Trebek be a great host on Love Connection? Probably not.
Well, you know he loves the game. I mean, that's part of watching it. You get that feeling, and I think.
It's not even just the game. He loves the trivia. He loves the knowledge. He loves, knowing more about, Wikipedia posts than anybody else in the room. And has social media affected what you do? Absolutely.
Since you brought up Wikipedia.
As social media has disrupted pretty much everything that everybody's done up to now. Social media is a place where audiences who used to watch television now spend their time. Social media is a place that accelerates happiness with a product and accelerates anger with a product. Social media affects everything that we do in our entertainment lives.
Do you see? I mean, I've been told, because I do my little radio blog here, and I've been told that 2017 is the start of the internet blog radio generation, or whatever's going to happen with it. This is the big year. We've had a huge jump in the number of shows and people doing their blogs and their radio shows online. What is your take on that?
My take is that the more voices that are available to audiences, the better served those audiences are going to be. And if there's a way to get new voices, new ideas, new opinions about old issues available to audiences, that's wonderful. That's what we should do. We should support that as much as possible. The trick in that is to get enough promotion so that the people who would be interested in blog radio shows like yours know that it exists and can go and find it. It's easier to search, but as there's more and more competition, there's more and more chances to get lost. Now, in the podcast business, for instance, the top 100 podcasts, the top podcast, I think last year or this season, the top podcast was S-Town, which apparently delivered 16 million downloads, and the bottom of the top 100 list is 500,000 downloads. So that says to me that there's a huge audience looking for new ways to access stories, and a whole new set of people who are interested in telling those stories.
Yeah, and those are some big numbers, and it's easy to measure. We talked about briefly some of the ways that we were trying to count how many people were watching television shows, and I remember, to me, one of the things that became very aware that people were watching us was when I believe it was Janet Jackson had her wardrobe malfunction, and at the news after that Super Bowl that evening, they immediately told us that 700,000 people had recorded that and backed up their TiVo and watched it again. And I mean, that was instantaneous, literally. I mean, you had a halftime show, and 2 hours later you're at the news and they're telling you this.
Right.
And it was like, whoa, who's monitoring this? And people started reading their user agreements, and oh wow, I give them permission to watch everything I do. And it's it's kind of a
measurement business has come an awfully long way, and the one of the issues that I think we're going to have going forward is that a lot of those measured metrics are proprietary to the companies that own them. Netflix owns all of the data about all of its users, viewing habits, and they don't spit them out. I'm sure that Amazon and Hulu are working down the path. But
oh yes.
The good news is that that those are actual numbers. I mean, back in the day when I started in television, it was color, but just barely. The measurement was they sent Nielsen and Arbitron sent a diary to people's houses, and you wrote down what you watched.
My mom still does that. She's 75 years old. And she's still doing the Nielsen stuff.
That's pretty awesome. but I'm not sure. I mean, your mother, I'm sure, is accurate and diligent. But when you go and read a lot of those diaries down in Dunedin, Florida, you see that most people fill them out after the fact, and often it's a reflection of people's favorite shows rather than their actual viewing patterns. Now that we have meters and virtually all of our online activity is measured, the numbers are far more accurate.
Well, you're right. My mom is actually very diligent because she found out the better her reports are, the more points she would get. And she's gotten several televisions and computers and things like that with her points. So that's important for her. So
good for her. Congratulations. And she should watch a lot of shows, particularly the ones that I'm involved with.
Well, I know she does love Judge Judy, that's for sure.
That's awesome, and don't we all?
Oh, yeah, she is amazing. Can you get me an interview with her? No.
Probably not.
I can ask. That's all.
If you don't ask the question, the answer is always no.
That's right. No harm, no foul.
Exactly.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on here. Are there some last thoughts you want to share with my listeners?
It was a pleasure, talking to you. I don't know a lot about everything else that you do on the show, but I kind of wanted to give a shout out to a homeless organization in Alexandria, Virginia called Safe Haven that actually has a program that brings mentally ill homeless people into their environment, and in a couple of years they've had very good success in getting those people into housing and life environments that where they can be self-sufficient and self-supporting. And I think they do important work, and I'm happy to know of them.
And that's awesome. We are about trying to change the attitude of people about mental health issues. I mentioned at the beginning of the show, probably before you were on, that, I was at a hospital working with a patient who's severely medically ill, and I gave her a diagnosis of depression. I was sitting there talking to her about it, and no, you can't put me in a mental hospital, and that's not what that means,
No, it's so many of those diseases have so many stigma have so much stigma attached to them that people don't go and get the help that's available to them and the help that they need.
And that's what we want. And we want people to be able to talk about it at the kitchen table and talk about it at work and talk about it at school and not have any fear of reprisal.
Exactly.
And,
nobody has any qualms talking about their bladder infection. Why should you have qualms talking about your depression?
No doubt. I've had those conversations too. So thank you very much for coming on, Lou. I really appreciate it. Maybe we can get you on again in the future.
Thanks for having me. I'd love to talk to you again.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everyone. That concludes today's edition of Mainstream Mental Health Radio. Special thanks to our amazing guests, and especially Lou Dennig. I think he's not a psychologist and not involved in direct psychology, but as you guys can tell, he's measuring a lot of our psychological behavior, and he can pretty much pick people out. That's why he's been successful at what he's doing. So to learn more about our show, check us out at mainstreammentalhealth.org and check out our radio show at Blog Talk Radio, Mainstream Mental Health. And remember, life is what happens while you're making plans. So buckle up.
Thanks for listening to Mainstream Mental Health Radio with your host, Dr. John Huber. Check us out on social media, Google+, Mainstream Mental Health, Instagram @Mainstream Mental Health, Twitter @Mainstream MENTL, and search for Mainstream Mental Health on Facebook. Please tune in every week to Mainstream Mental Health Radio with your host, Dr. John Huber.